begin on the baseball diamond where the New York Mets stole the back page of the sports section this morning here in the Big Apple. So many rumors had Toronto ace and New York native Marcus Stroman pinstripe bound, but the Amazons pulled the shocker on Sunday, dealing for Stroman. The Mets sent two prospects to the Jays for the pitcher. The 28-year-old has had a career year, posting a 2.96 ERA. The right-hander is owed the remainder of his $7.4 million salary and will be eligible for a fourth and final year of arbitration going into the 2020 season. It is a bit surprising to hear that the Mets, of all teams, acquired Stroman, as the club is in fourth place in the National League East, 5 games under 500. They are 11.5 games out of first place in the division and are 6 games out of the second wild card slot, with 8 teams total in the mix. Leave it to the Mets, buyers, not sellers, a few days before MLB's Wednesday trade deadline. It could still work out for the Mets, depending on what they do now, between now and then on Wednesday. We'll see if Noah Syndergaard and Zach Wheeler are still in Mets orange and blue by then. The Mets have won 4 straight. That's the good news. Michael Conforto sparked New York's offense with a 2-run homer and a 6-run first inning against Chris Archer, and the Mets held on to beat the reeling Pittsburgh Pirates 8-7 Sunday to match their longest winning streak this season. The Yanks are back on track following a few forgettable days in Boston. On Sunday Night Baseball, Didi Gregorius and Austin Romine each hit a 2-run homer off Chris Sale, and Domingo Germán struck out 9 for the Bombers, who had lost the first 3 games of that series by a combined score of 38-13 and saw their lead over Boston trimmed from 11 games to 8. Both the Yanks and Mets are off today. The Mets begin a series at the Chicago White Sox Tuesday, while the Yanks welcome Arizona to the big ballpark in the Bronx tomorrow. The Pinstripers are in the trade market for pitching, no doubt about that. Time for some quick hitters from around the world of sports. 22-year-old Egan Bernal becomes the first Colombian rider and youngest person to win the Tour de France since WW2. Congrats to him. In golf, it may not be a major, but Brooks Koepka treated the St. Jude Invitational like one this weekend. He goes on to win the title there. Congrats to him. And yet another blow to the New York Giants receiving corps. Golden Tate has been suspended for 4 games for violating the NFL's drug policy on performance-enhancing substances. He confirmed that on Saturday. Tate, who said the banned substance was a prescribed fertility medication, has scheduled an appeal for August 6th, and a resolution is expected before the start of the regular season, league sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter. The G-men signed 2 receivers since, but none of the big-name variety. However, as the Giants continue to lose wide receivers in the opening days of training camp, a former fan favorite once again says he's ready to dance his way back to the Meadowlands. Victor Cruz, who hasn't played in an NFL game since 2016, was asked on Twitter if he can come back to the Giants. Open quote, "I've been ready for 3 seasons now," close quote. Cruz wrote on Twitter. The 32-year-old did something similar last year after the Giants released Brandon Marshall, writing on Twitter, "I heard there's a job opening at wide receiver in New York. I always loved him. Giants should consider him. Why not?" Meanwhile, out in Cleveland, the bromance continues between Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. The Browns wide receiver paid his new signal caller a compliment in June when he said he has to adjust to the quarterback's arm strength because it is completely different than anyone he's played with in the past. Insert diss to Eli Manning here. Mayfield has had to do some adjusting as well. Mayfield has learned that Beckham can make plays with defenders draped all over him. That's what he said. And those plays led to Mayfield returning the compliment in the wide receiver's direction. Open quote, "He can do things I've never seen before," close quote, Mayfield said to SI.com. In the Octagon, UFC 240 was a goodie. Saturday night's fight saw Max Holloway retain his featherweight belt against former champion Frankie Edgar, while Chris Cyborg bounced back with a win. In motor racing, Formula One held its first wet race of 2019 Sunday. The German Grand Prix was well worth the wait in the wet. In a season that had been dominated by Mercedes, a series of rain showers on Sunday afternoon turned the order on its head and provided 2 hours of solid entertainment. By the time it was done, Max Verstappen had emerged victorious. In NASCAR, Denny Hamlin needed 3 laps of overtime, but held on to capture his 5th victory. Career win, at the Tricky Triangle in Sunday's showdown. It was a 1-2-3 finish for Joe Gibbs Racing as Hamlin took the checkered flag, followed by teammates Eric Jones and Martin Truex Jr. Scott Dixon won the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio. Sports course, in exciting fashion Sunday afternoon, narrowly holding off his teammate to take his 6th victory at the famed 13-turn road course. Dixon, who was on fading Firestone red tires, saw his margin begin to shrink as the laps wound down. Dixon managed to prevail in a place he's had so much success. Bob, do you remember when your mother said to stop playing video games and go outside and play? Well, she was wrong. An American teenager won $3 million. That's right, $3 million on Sunday after taking the top prize in a tournament in New York for the popular online video game Fortnite. And in the NBA, newest Brooklyn Net DeAndre Jordan is putting the Knicks and Nets situations into perspective. For much of the season, the buzz around the league was that Kevin Durant was headed to the Knicks. As the season moved along and it became clear things were not right between Kyrie Irving and the Boston Celtics, his name also became part of those New York rumors. In the end, they chose the crosstown Nets, not the Knicks. It was the team culture GM Sean Marks and coach Kenny Atkinson had built in Brooklyn, one that got the overachieving Nets into the playoffs last season. That tipped the scales, according to Jordan in a report in the New York Post. He should know Jordan spent 19 games with the Knicks at the end of last season. Durant and Irving took a little less money each before incentives to make room for Jordan to come to Brooklyn too. Those are the headlines. We hit the C-list for some good news for the Yankees. Sunday's win in Boston was a big one. I know it's not yet August, but the Bronx Bombers took their first major step toward October in late July last night with an 8.5-game divisional lead over the Tampa Rays, whom they play twice more, and a 9-game advantage over the Bo Sox, whom they face another 8 times. The Yankees could lose all of their remaining head-to-head games with their 2 top challengers and still win their first American League Division title since 2012, as long as they excel in their other contests. They'll truly have no one but themselves to blame if they can't complete their first task toward a victory parade the rest of the way. The MLB trade deadline is 4 p.m. this Wednesday. It will be extremely interesting to see what Yankees GM Brian Cashman has up his sleeve. The Mets deal for Marcus Stroman definitely helps the crosstown rival control a bit of the pitching market, with 2 notable names in Syndergaard and Wheeler among their rotation reportedly up for grabs. Why stop at the rotation, though? The Yankees need pitching help, and they have reached out to the Detroit Tigers regarding the availability of closer Shane Greene, according to a report from MLB.com. Greene has been very good for Detroit, posting a 1.22 ERA with 22 saves in 37 innings. He struck out 41 batters while walking only 11. If the Yankees added him to their bullpen, he'd probably be 4th in line behind Aroldis Chapman, Adam Ottavino, and Zach Britton. The Yankees are obviously at least somewhat interested in Detroit's starting pitcher Matthew Boyd, like many teams are. They might as well check in on the Tigers' other assets. Maybe if the Yanks gauge what Detroit wants for Greene, they could better work out a deal that lands both Greene and Boyd. I still think the Yanks land Zach Greinke. They could take on his big contract. Greinke would undoubtedly boost their chances at winning title number 28. They've got a deep lineup and a stout bullpen, but their starting staff owns a so-so 4.45 ERA, and ace Luis Severino hasn't pitched an inning all season long. The Yankees are on Greinke's no-trade list, but such things are negotiable these days. The Pinstripers are truly in the driver's seat. 1 or 2 really good moves and some solid play the rest of the way opens the door to a limitless October. That's your sports. I'm Bobby C. Stay tuned. Play those video games this weekend. We'll be back after this.